Speaking of Courage podcast.
Finally
Chase is
back.
just giving me the whole rundown on his FIFA World Cup scandal.
Sure, I was. Yeah, I don't like any sports.
Yeah.
Definitely not soccer.
You don't pretend that you like soccer
I don't
for
pretend
every
that-
4 years.
I don't pretend that I like anything. So yeah, not my style.
All right, how you been, man?
Good, you?
It's been what, 6 months?
I think so. It's probably been maybe a year and a half or something like that. Yeah.
Where are we headed
Been a
today?
while. All right, so today we're going to do a soldier by the name of Thomas Baker, and this is going to be World War II in the Pacific.
Okay.
So Baker is one of my favorites. Kind of interesting thing about him, I've noticed on like Instagram, I've seen some memes with him on there. So his story is not well known, but a part of his story sometimes comes up in short snippets and formats on those kind of people.
Oh, okay.
So trying to flesh out his story a little bit and tell the whole story here today. So
Off
World War
subject,
II
really
Pacific.
quick. There was a Medal of Honor recipient on Monday Night Football last night, and I went to go snap a picture, and John called me at the same damn time.
So there was, I follow the Medal of Honor on Instagram, the museum. I think they all were out there holding the flag, so I don't know which one you would have saw.
Oh, okay.
But I know Kyle Carpenter was there, and I
Yeah,
saw
it was an older
Doc
guy.
Ballard and a few of the other ones there.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've been doing things in conjunction with the NFL.
Oh, that's good.
Trying to change the image, you know,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Good way to do it.
Yeah, so Thomas Alexander Baker is who we're doing today, though. Like I said, World War II in the Pacific. I think I mentioned it before. This is kind of my favorite
Yeah.
subject because usually the Army gets overlooked in the Pacific. It's usually more the Marines, and World War II is just kind of that war that, you know, it inspires so much, and there's so much to it, and there's so many actions going on. And you'll see on this one, he earned his medal on during the Battle of Saipan, which we already covered. Ben
Yeah.
Solomon was
Yeah.
also the Battle of Saipan. So it's kind of interesting to see how much was going on in these small little places.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And they may have like run into each other.
Could have.
Yeah.
Might have been within earshot of each other when those machine guns were firing and
That's
everything.
crazy,
you know,
man.
might have been facing some of the same enemy in different parts of the island, if
Yeah.
you will. Yeah. So Thomas Baker was born June 25th, 1916 in Troy, New York. And he ended up graduating Troy High School in 1934. So a little bit older than some of the World War II generation that we usually deal with, who were born in maybe 2022. But he's still that same greatest generation growing up during the Depression.
Yeah.
You know, those very difficult times that formed these hard men that were able to face this huge challenge that we ended up having. During the Great Depression, very difficult to find jobs, very difficult to find work, very difficult just to survive and keep your families together. And Thomas was lucky enough, he was able to actually get a job at the YMCA, which was one of those organizations that has long history in our country, and he was able to work there. But while he was there, he heard that the local National Guard unit would pay $1 a drill, meaning like, you know, you go to drill, like if you have any friends in the Guard or the Reserve today, like,
Yeah.
I have to go to drill this weekend. He heard they were paying $1 a drill, so he decides he was going to join up, almost essentially to help ends meet,
Yeah.
which is what a lot of these guys were doing. So he ended up joining the 101st Infantry Regiment, 27th Infantry Division when he was 19 years old. So he's going to become a member of the New York National Guard. Now, this is going to be before the war is really on the horizon, so it's kind of a different vibe, right?
Yeah.
You're training for the military, you're learning these skills, but there's not that imminent jeopardy
No
there.
goal.
There's no, you're going to football practice without the game,
Yeah, yeah.
essentially, right? But he ends up learning to enjoy it, and he ends up taking pride in it. And a lot of these guys you'll see that are from all over the country, it's almost like a football team in a sense. You know,
Yeah.
your unit, you have your guidons, you're competing against other units and things. So he ends up taking pride in being a member of the unit. And in 1938, when his enlistment ended, he actually re-enlisted to stay in the unit because this kind of became a part of what he liked to do. So that he found that discipline as something that he liked, and that unit pride and everything. So
Oh, very cool.
pre-war guys, you know, we always talk about the war here. A lot of these guys were thrust into it in 1941. So you have a guy like Baker who's already going to have that
Do you think going through the Great Depression and literally people being depressed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, with
Yeah.
not a whole lot of stuff to look forward to, do you think that that drew them to the military?
I think absolutely it gives a lot of people a sense of purpose and a sense of hope,
focus.
because you'll hear a lot of the stories too, just on the monetary issue of guys having more money than they ever had in their lives before. You know, sometimes now
meals.
we think about, you know, you're not making any money in the Army. Yeah, that's compared to we're in California. What's the minimum wage? $17 an
Yeah,
hour right
yeah.
now, right? Back then, there were families that were splitting up one piece of meat and a bread for dinner. So if the son goes off to the Army and now he's got a pocket full of money he can send home, like we talked about Audie Murphy sending home all that money, that's huge. And then it gives you a sense of you felt like crap your whole life and you felt worthless because you can't find a job. And now all of a sudden, people are calling you sergeant and giving you respect and standing a certain way when they talk to you. You have a nice clean pair of clothes. You're combing your hair a certain way. So yeah, it absolutely
gives you some type of purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So which is one of those reasons why he re-enlisted. By the summer of 1940, though, things are starting to change, right? In September 1st, 1939, the Germans, Nazis invaded Poland. The war in the Pacific's already been raging. The Japanese have invaded Manchuria. War clouds are on the horizon, right? Czechoslovakia is going to fall. So it's clear that the division is going to get called into federal service. So he's part of the New York National Guard, which is controlled by the state. But now they're going to be federalized. So we all know what that means because they're going to fall under provisions of the new Selective Service Act, which is going to federalize them for a year, essentially. So like this state of emergency almost. So they have their 2-week summer camps, which is actually going to be extended to 3 weeks. So the writing's on the wall for all of these guys. And then in October of 1940, his whole unit boards trains, and they ended up going to Fort McClellan, Alabama. And this is where they are told, hey, you're part of the regular army now for a year. But of course, that ends up getting extended to this great World War II term of for the duration plus 6 months, meaning until the war's over plus 6 months.
Yeah.
That's kind of a weird thing to tell. I mean, he's older, but to tell a young kid.
But also a real motivating thing to tell
It's
freaking army.
Exactly. It's not a year tour and you go home. It's you're fighting until the war's over, the state of emergency is over. And
Think about how much more motivated you are to finish the job.
Right. The only way home is through Berlin and Tokyo. It's different.
So let's go get it. You're not just going, let me get 365 days so I can leave.
Exactly. It's not a survival game. It's a victory game.
Yeah. It's like sudden death overtime.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to finish. As we know, though, December 7th, 1941 is going to change all that. So if the writing wasn't already clear enough, all of a sudden we are thrust into war, and we are thrust into war with a huge loss. One of the most lopsided victories in world history was the Japanese victory of us at Pearl Harbor, right? Just slammed our Navy, destroyed half of our fleet, put us in shock. So the 27th Division, which has already formed and been training, they were actually rushed to the West Coast. They're rushed from the East Coast to the West Coast, and they were the first full combat division to leave the U.S. for duty in the Pacific, right? So all of these guys that a few years before had maybe joined for money, or maybe joined for training, or maybe joined for patriotism. Now all of a sudden they're thrust in it. You're kissing your wives and your kids goodbye. And again, because it's the National Guard, some of these guys are a bit older.
Yeah.
They have established lives back home. Some of them that were lucky enough to have their good jobs. They're leaving though, and they're getting sent off to we don't know where and we don't know how long. And they don't have a ton of training and they don't have a ton of equipment. But they're going to be sent to the Pacific. But they're actually going to end up in Hawaii. And for 9 months, they're going to man the beach defenses in Garrison, Hawaii. So rather than getting sent to Guadalcanal or thrust straight into combat, they're in Hawaii because we don't know if another attack's coming or not.
Right.
So they're going to be manning these positions and just writing letters home or what have you. Certain combat teams from the 27th Division were actually going to be sent to other places, though. And they're going to fight in the Makin Islands and the capture of Eniwetok Atoll. But Baker's not going to be a part of this. So his unit is going to be stuck in Hawaii while these other guys are going off and seeing combat. So even though he had been in the Army since before the war, he's going to spend most of the war out of action. And that's going to be super frustrating for a guy like Baker or a guy that wants to fight, or any American that was witness to Pearl Harbor, whether it was over the radio or via the newspaper,
Was everybody affected by it?
Yeah.
Was there people that were affected that were in Pearl Harbor from pretty much everywhere in the country?
So Pearl Harbor, we had our major naval base there. So we had Army, Navy, Air Force, or Air Corps and Marines there.
So everybody across the country knew somebody that
there was, I believe, hundreds of civilian deaths too. I could be wrong on that number, but we'd have to, because they were, all the native Hawaiians were there. Japanese Americans were there. So it had major impact, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, I've mentioned it on the show before. My great uncle was at Pearl Harbor. So my grandma from New Mexico, living in the States, they don't have a lot. They're very poor. Their window to the war is that she hasn't heard from her brother for months, and she knows he was at Pearl Harbor, and she doesn't know what happened to him, until they get word that he comes home. And his...
because there was no way for them to go, hey, I'm good.
Exactly, right, for a while. And then he ended up fighting in the Battle of the Solomons. The captain of his ship was killed. They were in the, so they're hearing this news. So people like my grandma, they're going to be a representation of the bigger part of the country. It takes a while for news to get to you, and news comes slow and news comes wrong often.
Yeah.
So you're hearing things, and you don't know if your loved ones are alive or dead. So And you know how rumors are now. Imagine how rumors are before radios, and some people even had telephones and stuff, right?
Man.
So
And
yeah,
it was just those cards that would come?
the telegrams.
Have you seen a League of Their Own?
Yeah.
Was it
Actually
like
just
that?
watched that the other day. So you should have a chaplain and you'd get the telegram first, or military representatives would come if you lost someone. Yeah.
That sucks.
A lot of telegrams came. Your son's been wounded in action, or he's missing in action. Further information to follow you might get.
Dang.
So then you're in that limbo of not knowing if they're alive or dead. A lot of the airmen would go down and they'd be listed as missing in action. So the family would spend the whole war praying they were alive when, their buddies knew that they went down.
Yeah.
But they didn't get it reported properly for a number of reasons. But yeah, so it's crazy times. But Baker and these other guys, they're going to be watching the war go by them to a degree, right?
Yeah.
That aren't fighting them. And they're going to stay there until 1944, December of 1944. That's the first time the full division is finally going to fight as a unit. And this is going to be on the Battle of Saipan.
Okay.
And we've talked about Saipan a little bit. This is one of the bloodiest, costliest battles of the Pacific. If you guys haven't seen our Ben Solomon episode, the dentist episode, go ahead and check that one out. That has a little bit more about Saipan as well to give you an idea of the scope. There's multiple Medal of Honor recipients. And Saipan was fought from June 15th to July 9th of 1944. Sometimes it's called the D-Day of the Pacific, partly because of the size and scope, but also because June 6, 1944, D-Day is happening in Europe. So June 15th, they're kind of at the same time. It's getting a little bit overshadowed by what's going on in Europe, but it's just as important, in other ways, right? June 15th to July 9th, we ended up having 13,790 casualties, American, and 3,400 of those were killed in action. Okay,
Damn.
So less than a month, right? June, July, unless I'm wrong on that. That's less than a month. We had 3,000 guys killed in this tiny little area.
100 a day.
The Japanese had 29,000 casualties. Okay,
Damn.
24,000 killed in action and 5,000 suicides.
Cool.
Right? So
Yeah.
think about all the death on this tiny little place. And I keep saying it's small. It's 18 miles long and 5 miles wide. So 18 by 5
Jeez.
miles. Imagine an area, look on your map from Fontana to wherever you guys live. 18 miles by 5 miles. And you have 29,000 Japanese dead and 3,000 American dead, right? You have thousands of American wounded all over this tiny little place. Just nothing but death is going to be there. But the island's very strategically valuable, just like all these islands are.
Yeah.
Like in retrospect, we can look back and say that. I mean, are they worth the debt? It's hard to say in the bigger scheme of things, but it has strategic value because it's on the major supply route between the Japanese home islands and the Japanese garrisons in the Pacific. So this is where they're bringing their supplies through. So if we can cut that off, we're cutting off all these smaller islands. Also, it has an airfield that the Japanese are using to stage attacks against the American fleet that's in the Central Pacific, right? So each one of these islands we knock out, we're knocking out another one of their bases. We're making them have to go from less places. We're making them have to go further. And that airfield's going to give us a chance so we can launch our big-range bombers against Tokyo and the Japanese home islands, right? So it's hard to weigh the cost of human life, right? But these islands have to be taken. For the durations plus 6 months, you have to win this war. We have to get these islands, right? Nobody wants to be a part of it, but this tiny little dot in the Pacific that had no value to anybody before the war, now it's the most important thing there at the time, and we're fighting for resources all over. We're fighting for manpower. We have to take this island.
Just in case we had to hit the mainland.
We're going to have to hit the mainland in one fashion or another, whether it's by air or by land.
Right.
Yeah. So we have to hopscotch our way there. We have to cut them off all the way there. We're strangling these other islands that we don't want to land on because we're cutting off those supplies, if that makes sense.
Damn. That's a lot of people, man.
In a relatively small area, right?
Yeah.
Because you think today, again, not to minimize anything, but look at the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, losing several thousand people over the course of 20 years, right? This is less than a month, and we're
That's
losing
1,000 Japanese a day.
right
for 30
yeah,
days.
that's a good way to look at it. Isn't that
100
insane?
Americans, 10 to 1.
Insane. So the 27th Division is actually going to be assigned to the Marine 5th Amphibious Corps. So Army and Marines are fighting together in the Pacific. There's some animosity, but they're also going to be working together a lot, and you'll see that on a lot of these islands. This is going to be the 105th Regiment, their baptism of fire. All the other units have seen combat, but Baker's has not yet, so this will be their first. So they're going to come on shore on D-Day +2, as it's called, which is June 17th, and they're going to land on the southwest coast of the island. And Baker's 28 years old at the time, okay? So that's a bit older than a lot of the World War II troops and a lot of what we think of as, young combat guys. But he was a National Guardsman, and he had been in before the war, so it kind of explains that a little bit. But he's going to be a little bit older. He's going to be a little bit more mature. He's also going to understand the situation a little bit better. If you remember when you're, 16 and 18 and you're a dumb knucklehead and think you're never going to die, by the time you're 28, you kind of realize,
I'm going to turn 30.
Yeah, things hurt bad, too, and I don't want to go out like that.
Yeah.
So they're going to land on June 17th, and the next day they're going to move in position on the V Corps' right flank along the south coast, which all the units are going to be lined up in their specified areas, right? And they're going to be pushing forward. So just like every other battle we've talked about, every other soldier we've talked about, along with the enemy, they're facing the elements. This is going to be an island in the Southwest Pacific, so they're going to be facing intense heat and these cane fields, right, with an unseen enemy in it. And we often talk about Vietnam when you walk along these trails and you don't know if the enemy's there. You never know if you're going to get hit. You don't know if there's people around, if there's danger, if there's booby traps. In the Pacific, the enemy is absolutely there. There is no question, right? There's no doubt that you're going to face this vicious enemy on this island. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Right.
18 miles by 5 miles, you are going to find these 29,000 people and you have to kill pretty much every one of them was the way it was going, right? So just think of that. You can't let yourself fall into this complacency of, oh, maybe we'll be okay. Maybe there'll be another island. No, you or someone is going to get killed or wounded at some point.
And then think about the enemy too.
Exactly.
They're not the type that's going to wave a white flag.
They are absolutely not going to. And we've been fighting since 1941 at this point, and they've shown time and time again that they're some of the most vicious fighters in the history of the wars that we've ever faced.
Yeah.
That's why we mentioned the 5,000 suicides. This is not an enemy that will surrender, and this is not an enemy that's going to sell their lives cheaply. They're going to try to take as many as you can because they believe in their cause just as much as we believe in our cause.
Right.
The only difference is they know their cause is hopeless at this point to a degree, right? So they want to make you
them even
pay.
scarier.
They want to make you pay so there's less of you to attack their brothers on other islands or their home island.
Isn't that culture such a trip?
It's scary.
It's scary,
right?
and it's freaking. There's something cool about it.
It's the ultimate honor code, Bushido, right? But it was perverted to such a horrible sense in World War II, which is, that's what war does to people and things.
Yeah.
So their objective is going to be a place called, I'm sure I'm pronouncing this wrong, Nafoutan Point.
Nafoutan.
It's going to be a slow march, right? They're just going to be moving, again, across this island through these cane fields, waiting for the enemy, because the enemy has the drop on them. They're dug in. There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, we can't just waste all our artillery pounding every inch and then move forward. So you have to move forward and make contact.
This is what we talk about, playing hide and go seek in somebody else's backyard.
Exactly. And they've been there for a bit, and they're waiting for you. They're itching. So on June 19th, they're going to slug their way forward until they're halted by an enemy strong point. So they're going to be moving, and then they're going to hit that inevitable ambush, right? They're going to start getting pounded by these Japanese troops that have the high ground. And this particular position, they have a 77 millimeter dual purpose gun, like those big Navy guns, right? I don't know if I was actually a Navy gun, but these big pounding guns, and it's going to be covered by two mutually supporting machine guns on the high ground. And this is an area called Butterfly Ridge, right? And we call that, that intersecting fire. So everywhere, my range of fire is going to go up and until yours. So every part of that battlefield is going to be covered sectors of fire, right? With those two machine guns covering that huge gun.
And we have to penetrate
and
that.
we have to get up to it, right? So the only way to do that is to push forward. You can try to use artillery, you can try to use mortars, and then eventually you're going to have to get at it with the infantrymen. They're going to have to get in there. And that's exactly what they're going to do. So Baker's unit is Alpha Company, or Able Company. So twice A Company is going to attack this ridge, and twice they're going to fall back. So what that means is you're going to muster your men, you're going to make your plan, you're going to move forward, you're going to be bounding, and you're going to take so many casualties and so much intense fire that you're going to fall back, and you're going to drag your wounded, and you're going to drag your dead, and you're going to be looking around, and your heart's going to be pounding, and you're going to reload, and then they're going to go again.
Which sucks, right? Because they have the necessary losses.
Exactly.
And it's like, okay, we already took those. Now get to that point.
Exactly.
Now we got to start over and get all those losses again.
Right. And at some point, when it's too many, right, but that position still has to be taken by somebody. Right. So they're going to push forward again, and again they're going to get thrown back. They're going to take so many wounded, and they're going to have so many dead, and they're not going to be gaining any ground, and they're not going to be able to get close enough. So by now,
what's their hope here from a leadership standpoint? Is that they'll just run out of...
The Americans or the Japanese?
The American.
No, that you make a breakthrough and that you're able to disable one of those machine guns or flank it, so then now it doesn't have the intersecting fire. Now we can get behind it and push and stay on that line and take the other machine gun.
Strategic.
And now there's a hole in their lines that we can exploit and get behind, so these other guys that are
until we get to the next one.
Yeah, it's just until the next one, until the next one, until the next one. So, and in this case, we have Baker, who's an ammo bearer in the mortar squad. So our mortars are going to be firing too, that defilade fire. We can't see him with the rifle, so we're trying to go up and over. But we run out of mortars. So the leaders in this unit are looking around and they're going, twice we failed. We're out of mortars, but we have to take this position. Command's telling us. So they said, Baker, go back to the command and get more ammo. We need more mortar ammo because we're going to just pound these guys with mortar, right? So Baker does as he's told. He runs back to the command post to pick up this high explosive ammo. But when he gets there, he sees a bazooka with 4 rounds of HE, right? So he takes it upon himself like a good young infantryman soldier does. And he says, instead of grabbing that mortar, I'm going to grab that bazooka, right? So all of our guys are pinned down up in this position. And they're waiting for Baker to run up to their line with mortar rounds.
Yeah.
But instead, they see Baker sprint past them with the bazooka. So they're sitting there waiting. They're taking fire. But Baker decided, to hell with defilade fire. I'm going directly at him. So Baker grabs his bazooka and he charges. He runs from the command post and he runs right past. So the other men are going to watch him run from a position of relative safety to the front line and then keep running. So our guys are stuck and pinned down. And he's going to run 50 yards through enemy fire, just directly in front of our lines, drawing all of that fire at him with his bazooka because he wants to dislodge this position by himself. One of the witnesses was a Tech Sergeant Dominic Dario said, I saw Sergeant Baker take a bazooka and move out alone against a strong enemy fortification. When they saw him coming with that bazooka, the Japs opened up on him with every kind of fire they had. So again, he's shifting the fire, right? That's going to take the pressure off of our guys back there, and he's got a weapon to do something with. So he's going to run up towards the Japanese, directly into the face of the enemy until he's 100 yards away from their stronghold. These guys are dug in. They have bamboo logs, fortifications, they have their machine gun intersecting fire, they have rifle fire, they have that 77-millimeter gun, and he's running directly at them. So once he gets to a position where he has a line of sight, he's calmly and methodically going to fire all 4 rounds of his bazooka directly into that position, and he's going to cause severe damage to those guns, right? Breaking kind of the back of this force so his guys are able to get through. And Dario went on to say, he moved within 100 yards of the position and calmly fired 4 rounds into the strong point. Then, out of ammunition, he rushed the strong point with his bayonet and finished off the remaining Japs.
Damn.
So he fires his bazooka, and then he's out. So instead of falling back to his guys, he's got the initiative now, right? They're dazed, they're knocked loopy, so he rushes forward and starts stabbing his bayonet into these guys and killing them. And he single-handedly takes his position. Another witness, Tech Sergeant Richard Hoffey, said, the 4 rounds from the bazooka knocked out the machine guns in the position, and Sergeant Baker finished off the protecting rifleman with his bayonet. The Japs couldn't hit him with their automatic fire, and they couldn't stop him with the steel in the close fighting. And like I said, he single-handedly allowed the American offensive to continue. So imagine you're these guys that are down there trapped.
Dude.
You're seeing your buddies die. You're waiting because they're going to tell you, once we get those mortar rounds, we're going to attack again, right? And you're praying because you don't want to have to go face this gun. And then you see this nut run up there, fire the bazooka, and while the Japanese are phased, rushing in and thrusting a bayonet into these guys.
That's crazy.
And it's a misconception that bayonets are often used. Bayonets are very, 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 very rarely used. Even in the Civil War, very rarely were bayonets actually used. This is a 28-year-old man, rushing forward into the enemy, sticking a bayonet into a human being, right? That means they're in close enough proximity to kill you. They're in their defensive position, but he's using everything he has at this point to overtake this position to stop them from killing his
berserker
men.
mode.
Exactly. And he was successful. So his men were able to move forward. But just imagine the courage to run through that enemy fire, the machine gun fire, the 77-millimeter, and those machine guns are protected by riflemen. You don't know how many guys are there. You don't know how many grenades are going to be
running into a
coming.
blanket of lead, dude.
You should just be expecting to die,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So he's going to get that courage, though, and that audacity a little bit more like we often
It must have
talk
been
about.
a pretty hopeless situation for him to do that. Right?
Exactly.
You got to think of that hopelessness.
Because that's not
of
the
it.
smart thing to do. Because if you rush up and you get shot and now our machine gun's out or you're
And he's
wounded, Mike.
older, and he's probably looking at it like, this is stupid. Give me the goddamn bazooka.
Give me the bazooka. Let's just take this,
Yeah.
right? But heroism aside, I mean, that should have been enough for a Medal of Honor right there. But you don't get a pat on the back and get to go back to the lines. You just got to on to the next, right? So they're just going to keep pushing forward. The unit's going to keep pushing.
So now
forward.
he's getting a reputation, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody that saw that would never forget that, right? Guys are writing about it years later. 3 days later, they push into an area called Death Valley, which obviously isn't good.
Not
right?
somewhere where you want to be.
Yeah, they don't. It's not a. What did Norm Macdonald say? You live in a cotton candy house. Yeah, it's not a.
It's not a cotton candy house.
Yeah, they name these things for a reason. So they're going to move forward though, and they're going to keep driving forward because they can't stop till they take this island, and we can't stop until we take the Japanese homeland one way or another. So it's just another part in this war. A few days into this, they're going to take heavy fire at a place called Papaco, or I don't even want to try to pronounce that. Papaco.
Papaco.
There you go. Company A is advancing slowly through an open field. worst thing you can have is that open field, right? That's what we call death ground, right?
Yeah.
Sun Tzu in The Art of War, in death ground fight, in difficult ground press on, in encircled ground devise stratagems, in death ground fight. It means you have nothing. There's nothing you can do but fight. You're in an open field, right?
Yeah.
We can't worry about tactics and things. You just have to press forward and take the fight to the enemy, and that's what we have. So you want to avoid this at all costs. In Vietnam, you don't walk on the trails, don't walk in the open. This is an open field, but we have to get through it. We're trying to push our line forward, right? They have to keep pace with the rest of the front. The enemy's dug in all around, though, so we don't know where they're going to be, but we know they're out there. So this is a very scary thing. And it's 5 p.m.
You're just waiting for them to open up on you?
Exactly, and hope you're not the one that goes down in that first salvo and you're able to react accordingly.
Imagine the anxiety, dude.
Yeah, it's just awful, and it's just grating on you day after day after day after day after day, right? Because it's not even a month-long battle.
You're just waiting to die.
You're just waiting to die. The law of averages, eventually you're going to get hit.
Yeah.
You're hoping your wound is not bad enough to kill you or make you lose a limb.
Yeah.
Or your genitals, you know,
Yeah.
You're hoping to be able to get that $1 million wound that they can take you back to the lines and you can survive from. But again, it's 5 p.m., so they have to get to their objective by 6 p.m. so they can dig in, because once night falls, the enemy owns this island.
Yeah.
So not only is it a crappy place, but we can't waste time. We have to get through this because night is infinitely more dangerous. And if we don't keep pace with the rest of this line, this is all over the island, right? We're going to have a gap in our lines. The enemy's going to exploit that. They can be behind us, and that can cause horrendous casualties. So when you find this open ground, there's not a lot you can do but push forward. But as the company's moving forward, Baker's got kind of a sixth sense, right? So he volunteers. He says, I'm going to take up the rear. I'm going to be kind of the rear guard, and he's going to move more cautiously. So as they're going, he's going to kind of try to protect his flank because he feels like they're moving into a trap, and he doesn't want the unit to get ambushed. So he's going to stay on the periphery, right? Because what the Japanese are going to do is you don't shoot at the first American you see.
Let them all get in.
Let them all get through, and then you open up on the middle. Then the guys in the front, if they turn to fire on the back, they're going to have crossfire. They don't know where you're at. So they're baiting this trap. And Baker's aware of this, and so are the other guys. But he's going to wait, and he's going to walk on the periphery. So as these Americans are moving, Baker's moving along, and then all of a sudden he freezes, right? In doing what he's doing, he ends up stumbling on a Japanese position that has 2 Japanese officers and 12 Japanese soldiers who are waiting for the unit to pass through so they can ambush. So 14 Japanese soldiers, but they don't see him and he sees them. They're facing towards the Americans and they're waiting to get to that sweet spot where there's enough of them that they can open up with their machine guns and their weapons. But he's by himself, right? So in a sense, he has an advantage because they don't see him and he sees them. But this is 12 guys versus
You got
one
to kill
guy.
12 before
12
one
guys
kills
with
one.
one guy, right? And I don't know what kind of weapons they have, but you can assume they at least have rifles. They probably have grenades or some type, they probably have at least one automatic weapon, right? So he knows he has to do something because he has to save these guys' lives. If he waits and they open up, who knows how many of them they're going to kill. But it's 1 against 12. How many rounds do you have in your clip in your M1 Garand? How many grenades do you have on your belt? What are you going to be able to do before you reload? He doesn't have a radio. This isn't.
He can't warn
This isn't
anybody.
Iraq. He can't start yelling because that's going to open the ambush. So he doesn't have a lot of choices. So he does the only thing he can do. He grits his teeth and he charges. He fires directly into the enemy and he starts firing his M1 Garand as fast as he can and as accurately as he can. Probably aiming at the guys with the highest value weapons, right?
Yeah.
Shooting at those machine gunners or shooting at whoever had any type of automatic weapon. And as he's rushing forward, he's able to kill several of them because he catches them off guard. Like, again, we talked about the initiative. The Japanese are looking forward, and all of a sudden they're eating rounds. They're starting to look. Their machine gunner's dead. The next guy's dead. He's pumping these big rounds into these guys, and they're going down, and he's charging directly at them. So they're trying to orient and turn, and he's killing them as they look, right? He's killing them as they try to reposition themselves. And then he's going to run out of ammo in that clip. Again, it's a clip. It's an M1 Garand. And then he's going to jump behind a packing crate. And while he's reloading, he's throwing grenades over top of the box. So these guys that are trying to recover and try to figure out what's going on, they're just getting killed. And then he's going to come around and he's going to finish the rest off. So one man single-handedly was able to kill these 12 guys that were ambushing, that were waiting to ambush his unit. And this is just several days after he took a position single-handedly by himself.
So
right?
he's Rambo in it.
He's a tool of warfare, right? He's in the fight now, which is just, he's 100% man and machine combined together to be just this warrior, what he's supposed to be. One man destroying 12 days after using that bazooka. So now you got to imagine, I don't want to say cocky, but he's got to be feeling pretty good at this point, right? He's got to be feeling like he's somewhat unstoppable. But now he's going to have to try to catch up to his company because they were able to push forward because they didn't rush back to this attack because they're fighting all up and down the line. So he's going to be covered with sweat. He's going to be covered with fuel and adrenaline, feeling unstoppable, feeling that berserker rage, like you said, kind of just seething and moving forward. And then he's going to get about 500 yards up, and he's going to stumble on more enemy. There's going to be 6 more enemy he's going to be hiding in a clump of bushes, doing the same thing, waiting to ambush the guys. So once again, Thomas Baker can't yell. He can't do anything else. He's got himself. He's got his rifle and his grenades. So once again, Thomas Baker attacks. And in this brief firefight, he's able to kill all 6 of these men without being wounded.
Damn.
Because you figure, again, they're laying in the prone, they're looking one way. He starts taking headshots and then just diving into them, with that beautiful battle implement, the M1 Garand, and he's going to be able to kill 6 of these guys before he moves forward and he catches up to his unit and continue pushing across this plain. Should we be at a Medal of Honor yet? I would think so.
Yeah.
So absolutely, he's earned his Medal of Honor by now. But again, the battle's not over. So in the next 4 days, the unit's going to keep moving forward, and they're going to be moving fast now because the Japanese resistance is starting to fall. There was a Marine radioing back. He actually, about the 27th, he radioed back. They're moving a mile a minute, which, meaning like they're flying across this island. So that's an awesome thing. We're winning. We're taking the island. But it's a wounded animal now, right? We're cornering the Japanese into the end of the island. So by D+21, which means 21 days after the battle started, the battle's nearing the end. Our troops are only a few hundred yards from the Monsha village and on the northwest coast of Saipan, which is where all the remaining Japanese are going to be trapped, okay? We talked about it before. The Japanese soldiers, they have this honor code. They are not going to sell their lives cheaply. They're very prepared to die. We want to survive and win this war. They want to die, right? They're willing to die for their emperor. They're willing to die for their honor.
That's a hard enemy to kill.
Exactly. So the final stage of these battles are always going to be the most dangerous because they're going to have those dreaded banzai charges, which in the Pacific we actually haven't seen since the early stages of the war. But on Saipan, it was one of the...
They just start rushing.
Exactly.
They're cool with dying.
Willing to die, right? And again,
wave after wave after wave.
Yeah, we don't want to oversimplify it into just this Bushido, like I mentioned before. If they kill you, you're not killing somebody else on the next island, or you're not killing their homeland because they believe in the propaganda that we're going to try to murder and rape every Japanese woman that we get to. So they believe in their cause just as well. And they have a term called Gaiokusai, which means die with honor, and that's these banzai charges. Even more so, like again, what happened on Saipan was just, even compared to the rest of the Pacific War, this last final banzai charge was just insane, and all the guys that experienced it will never forget something like that. So our American soldiers who've been fighting for 21 days that are pushing across this island, right? The exhaustion, you're not taking a bath, you're going to the bathroom where you stand, you're digging holes, you're getting very, very little sleep. Anybody that's ever worked like a night shift and you got woken up in the middle of the night, so you only get 3 hours, do that again and again and again and again.
With the anxiety of, I'm going to die.
Yeah, that is not a very well broken sleep, or an unbroken sleep, because you're terrified and every sound in your hole, and you're just going to fall from exhaustion, and your face is going to be caked, and your feet are hurting, and if you have minor wounds that they didn't ship you back on the line from, and you're facing infection and everything else like that. So you're going to be tired, you're going to be scared, you're going to be exhausted.
Which brings the brotherhood even closer, which brings the anxiety even worse, because now you love the guy next to you even more.
Absolutely.
And now you're not only worried for yourself, you're worried for them.
And you haven't had time to mourn the deaths of these guys, but you've seen quite a few of your friends fall. And again, this is a National Guard unit. Some of these guys might have been together since 1940, and now they're seeing each other die in a rapid rate. Right? It might be 4 or 5 guys that their wives back home and they're dying. So again, to set the stage, the Japanese are going to be preparing to die. The Americans are preparing to dig in for that night. We're trying, it's just another day. We don't know if we have one more day on this island or one more week or whatever it's going to be, but we're going to continue fighting forward. But on July 6th, the Japanese general who's in charge of all of these troops on Saipan is named Saito, gathers all of his officers in a cave, and he calls for a final all-out attack on the Americans. Again, which later in the war, we didn't see banzai charges as much, but he's going to bring all of his troops together, and he says, I will advance with those who remain to deliver still another blow to the American devils and leave my bones on Saipan as a bulwark of the Pacific. I will never suffer the disgrace of being taken alive. I will advance to seek the enemy. Follow me, right? So he tells the officers this, and they're going to go tell their troops. So now every Japanese soldier knows now it's time. Now is our time to die. This is your last night on Earth, right? Say your prayers, do what you need to do, prepare yourselves to die. So the Americans who are preparing themselves to live and to try to go to sleep and to try to get another, there's no avoiding this inevitable clash. Oh, absolutely. Every American that fought in the Pacific respected the courage of the Japanese. You have to, right?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Courage and morality don't necessarily go hand in hand.
Straight out of the movies.
Absolutely.
That's 300, right?
It's the Spartan code that we look for, right? But like I said, they did horrific things as well under the guise of this code. The morality and the courage aren't inseparable, but you have to respect the courage. You
Yeah.
have to. So the Baker's unit's going to be digging in east of these railroad tracks, and they're going to be out of the woods, so they have a field of fire, right? Again, we don't know if it's going to be today or tomorrow or the next day. So you're preparing your position.
The Americans know it's coming?
We don't know that a bonsai attack's
Yeah.
coming, but we know that we have a wounded, trapped animal. We know that all the Japanese forces are now islands 18 miles long. Now they're all in this small little section. So we know that we're facing the major attack, right?
Yeah.
Either us attacking them or them attacking us, if that makes
Yeah.
sense, right? We know it's the inevitable's coming. There's no way around this. And by now, Baker's in command of a squad, okay? So he's on the front line, and he's trying to set his guys in for the night, our exhausted troops. We talked about it again. Fugitive from the law of averages. They know that this guy's been hit and this guy's been hit, and I'm still good. At some point, I'm going to get hit.
I'm going to get my turn.
And their greatest fear is going to be that bonsai charge. Every night they've gone to sleep, they've been, praying that they don't get woken up by this bonsai charge.
Because you're eventually going to run out of ammo, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or you're gonna keep killing them as they get close, but they're gonna get on top of you, and you're not gonna be able to fight them off. And the Japanese, not only are their soldiers coming, but they're actually moving forward, and they're adding their naval personnel on these scudded, that are on the island, and their civilian laborers. They're adding them to the force, so they're just growing in size with anybody that can hold a rifle. But they don't even have enough rifles. The Japanese don't have enough rifles to go around, so the officers are giving their pistols to these civilian labormen so they can fight, and they're just taking their swords. So the Japanese officers have swords. Some of these guys only
giving
have
up
spears.
the-
Yeah, because they're going to go down fighting with their swords, right? They're
Damn.
making spears. They're coming forward because they're going to use their body, because if you go down with your rifle, I'll pick up your rifle, right? If not, I'll use my spear. We can still overwhelm the Americans with our force of numbers because we're spread out,
Yeah.
You take one foxhole, you can get American weapons too.
Oh, yeah.
So meanwhile, the American officers on our end, they're briefing our troops, what we're going to do tomorrow, what our objectives is, how we're going to set in, and then they start hearing this loud buzzing sound, and it's going to get louder and louder, and then several Japanese soldiers are actually going to crash through the bushes into this company area, and then all hell is going to break loose. So while the officers are planning for the next day, the Japanese infiltrated. All up and down our lines, everyone's going to start firing, right? Nobody can help you because you have to help yourself. So the Japanese are going to be attacking in these numerous isolated attacks all over the line, and our artillery is going to respond in kind. So our artillery behind our line is just going to start firing everything they have, these high explosive rounds. By the morning, they ended up firing 2,666 rounds of high explosive rounds at the Japanese.
Damn.
Just firing,
Just
trying
mortars?
to stop them. No, these are artillery shells. Mortars are small. Artillery's huge.
Oh, the
right?
big-
Yeah,
yeah.
the big guns.
Yeah.
They're just firing nonstop. So these artillerymen, they're not sleeping. They're just firing, fire, trying to stop this attack. And it's killing these Japanese by the scores, but they're still coming, right?
Yeah.
Boom, a hole blows in their line. They keep coming. So it's going to disorganize the Japanese, but it's not going to stop them because their only objective is to get forward and kill. So by 03:37, so 3 in the morning hours, the full force of the attack had reached the battalion. Our guys are exhausted. They've been fighting this attack for nights, and they've been fighting for weeks. The only light you're going to see, because there's no natural light out there, is muzzle flashes. So it's going to be terrifying, right? I don't know how far you are from your next foxhole, but you're hearing your buddy scream. You're hearing the Japanese dying. You're hearing guns go. You're hearing
they're all
machine
around
guns
you?
all around you, and then you're hearing silence in certain areas, and you don't know if your buddy's hit. You don't know what's going on. You don't know how bad it is in front of you or bad at them. But all you know is there's death and destruction everywhere. This is your greatest nightmare, right? And if you get killed in this, you might get stabbed with a spear or a sword,
Yeah.
so it's not going to be a good death either. In the very initial stages of this attack, Baker's going to be in a foxhole fighting, just like everybody else. He's going to pop out of his foxhole, and he's going to start firing. A grenade's going to land in his foxhole right at the beginning of this attack, right? And it's going to explode, and shrapnel's going to rip into him and badly mangle one of his legs, okay? So opening area of this attack. He's probably got traumatic brain injury.
Yeah.
I don't know how you wouldn't if
Yeah.
you're in that enclosed area and you're wounded, and his legs shredded. So he's going to be disoriented, and it's terrifying. Pitch black, screaming,
No body armor either, right?
no body armor at all.
Yeah.
Just this helmet and your gear. And just, again, the M1 Garand clips, as many as you can carry. I think they have 8 rounds each in those or something like that.
Jeez.
So you're having to fire until it gets empty, and then whatever else you had. But despite Baker's injuries, he's going to be delivering accurate fire, right? He's calm, and he's cold because he's already a warrior. He's found this in himself. So he's going to keep delivering that accurate fire, and the enemy's going to get as close as 5 yards away, and he's going to keep killing them despite his wound. So he's ignoring his wound, and he's continuing to fire because what you don't want to do in combat is panic.
Yeah.
You don't want to waste your ammo. So he's waiting, and he's giving well-aimed shots. But they're getting within 5 yards. That's 15 feet. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
That's close enough for one to get on top of you. At this point, there's ebbs and flows of the attack. So he could fall back, if he wanted to, right?
Yeah.
He has several chances where he's able to fall back, but he refuses to be evacuated because that would mean he's leaving the other man. So despite his badly wounded leg, he's going to stay there because a lot of these other guys are wounded too. If every wounded guy got up and moved back, we wouldn't have any lines, right? All over this island, though, all over our front lines, our infantrymen are fighting for their lives. And again, we talked about Ben Solomon's in this attack, the Dennis firing on his machine gun. The commander, Thomas Baker's commander, William O'Brien, was actually another hero in this battle. He was running up and down the lines trying to encourage his own men. He stood with a pistol in each of his hands, and he was firing into the enemy, moving up and down the lines, yelling, "We'll slug it out with them. We won't give them 1 inch." And O'Brien fired until he ran out of ammunition, and then he threw his guns at the charging enemy, his pistols. He threw them at him, and then he picked up a Japanese sword, and he tried to fight with that. Damn. O'Brien was finally overwhelmed by an enemy horde as he stood on a jeep firing a 50-gal machine gun into the enemy. They actually physically overwhelmed him. And for his actions here in the Medal of Honor during that battle as well. But back to Baker, yeah. So this is the kind of stuff that's going on up and down the line, right? Yeah. This is guys are rising to their highest levels and guys are falling. There's other guys going to be cowering in holes.
50 cal.
O'Brien did, correct. Yeah.
So you can imagine how many enemy there were if he couldn't suppress them.
They physically overwhelmed them, and Solomon was overwhelmed on his machine gun. I believe he was on a 30 caliber machine gun. So you take Baker and these other guys with their single fire rifles, right? Their semi-auto rifles. Think about how terrifying that is when they're just not stopping.
Yeah.
So Baker's going to fire from his position, and he's going to fire until he runs out of ammunition, which is the worst thing that can happen, right? So all of your ammunition is empty. So the sheer number of Japanese bodies that are still coming force him to drag himself out of his hole and try to fall back to a friendly position. He's out of ammo. He's got nothing left, so he climbs out of his hole on his mangled leg, and he tries to get back. As he starts going back, he's almost engulfed by a wave of attackers, and they start fighting hand-to-hand. So he's almost enveloped by this wave, right? Yeah. Like when you're bodyboarding. They're on top of him, so he starts physically fighting. He's got a wounded leg and he's got traumatic brain injury, but he's able to get to his feet, and he starts clubbing the enemy with his rifle like a baseball bat. And he's swinging it at these Japanese enemies' head, trying to kill them, and he's able to do that until he's able to break free and fall back. During that attack, he hit the enemy so hard that he actually bent the barrel of his rifle. So now his rifle is useless because he's swinging that rifle like Davy Crockett, right? Killing the enemy with that weapon. Not just, this isn't a movie, this isn't, Steven Seagal crap where you're just pushing back. He's swinging with everything he has. Skulls are cracking, people are dying from the force of this, but he hits them so hard his barrel's bent, so he doesn't have a rifle now. So the situation is desperate and frenzied, right? There's Japanese overtaking him. There's Japanese killing people to the left and right of him. Americans are still fighting. People are falling back. People are moving forward. Eventually, we're able to kind of push this wave of the attack back. And as the fighting fell off, Baker fell to the ground exhausted and wounded, right? He falls to the ground and he just kind of lays there. And another soldier, PFC Frank Zeleniski, who was also wounded, saw Baker struggling. So he ran over to Baker, and he picks him up, and he carries him, because there's heroism up and down these lines, right? So this PFC, the Japanese have fallen back enough. We've pushed this way back, so he's going to go try to help Baker, because he sees he's just collapsed from exhaustion. He's bruised and battered, and he's bleeding from all these shrapnel wounds. So this private grabs Baker, and he starts to carry him, and he starts to drag him to his own lines and put him up and bring him while the enemy's falling back. But while he's carrying Baker, the enemy's still firing, and Zeleniski was also hit, and he couldn't carry Baker anymore. So he goes down, and now Baker's just laying there next to this guy that just got shot trying to save him, right? Baker was also hit. So after when the other soldier that was carrying was hit, Baker was also hit, but this time he's shot in the chest. So now he's wounded severely. So Baker's laying there, kind of taking an assessment of his wounds. He's swimming with that traumatic brain injury. He's bleeding from those shrapnel wounds, and now he's got a large caliber bullet wound to his chest, right? Another soldier, forward observer Captain Bernard Toff, saw Baker sprawled out and bleeding, so he runs through enemy fire. He grabs Baker, and he picks him up, and he starts carrying him, and he gets 30 feet, and then he's hit too, right? So to show you kind of the intensity of these combat, these guys are trying to get to him, so he goes down. So now Baker's laying there, breathing in, breathing out, and he's got that bullet in his chest. He's got those wounds. And another soldier runs to Baker, right? And Baker waves this one off because now he realizes,
it's costing people
their lives. Costing people their lives. So he says, "Get away from me. I've caused enough trouble. I don't want anyone else to get hurt from me." So he yells at him, "Get away, get away." And they said he told the soldier he didn't want to be carried to the rear. All he asked was to be propped up against a tree or a pole or something. So the soldier drags him and he props him up, and then he falls back like he said, right? And Baker's left out there alone, basically, to bleed out because he's got these multiple wounds. The fighting is going to last through the night. At 6 a.m., a corporal by the name of Carl Petroselli was helping form a line when he started to hear somebody, and he heard someone weakly calling his name, right? And then he looks and he sees Baker, and he's still propped up against that tree. And he later said, I saw Baker sitting up against a tree, and I tried to pick him up as we withdrew to the beach. He wouldn't let me help him. He told me, it's no use, Pat. I'm done for, and there's no use for anyone else getting hit. He was badly hurt, and he asked for a cigarette. So again, we talk about that calmness, right? He knows, because by now the fighting's died down a bit, but he's saying, I don't want anyone else get hurt for me. Just give me a cigarette. So Patricelli does that. He lights him a cigarette and he places it in his lips. And this is one of those soldiers that he has known since New York. They were in the National Guard together. So he's known him for years and years and years. And now he's watching him probably dying from that wound to his chest, right? Baker said, he smoked it as though nothing had happened. He was calm and stoic. So despite the terror, despite knowing you're going to die, like war or not, you're going to meet the inevitable, right? Imagine knowing you're going to die and being so stoic that you don't want to burden anyone else and you just want a cigarette. Ugh. Baker's unarmed at this point, though, and as Patricelli's lighting the cigarette, Baker looks and he sees that he's got a pistol on him. So he asks him, he says, can I have your pistol? So Patricelli says, yeah, because he sees that he's unarmed. So he's got one magazine of 8 rounds. So he inserts the magazine and charges it. So he's got a total of 8 rounds, 1 in the magazine, 7 in the tube. And Baker said, thanks. Now I can take some more of those Japs when I go. Just like the Japanese were preparing to die with honor, right? Baker's preparing to die with honor as well. No, I'm sure he had fear, but no self-pity, no loathing, no crying, no begging. Just literally like, give me something to fight with so I can make my last stand. So keep in mind, a pistol is a very poor combat weapon as well, right? You have very limited range, especially from a seated platform with multiple wounds and a wound in your chest. It's not going to be the easiest weapon to fight the Japanese off. And just days before, Baker was a machine, right? He's charging the enemy with a bazooka and a bayonet. He's killing all these guys, and now he's left a physically broken man, but mentally strong, right?
Yeah.
So he sat calmly smoking that cigarette and waiting for the inevitable when he would either bleed out or be killed by the onrushing Japanese, right? And just then they started to hear the sounds of the other attack. So the Japanese start coming again, and they're in the distance. So Baker looked to Patricelli and he said, you get out of here, Pat. Thank you for everything, and give my regards to all the guys. So that was Baker's last words. So Patricelli did as he told. He fell back to friendly lines, and that was the last time that anyone saw Thomas Baker alive, unfortunately. So, of course, the Japanese, we know the rest of the story. They moved forward, and they pushed past Baker's position, and the Americans fought desperately to survive. Bravery aside, it was inevitable that the Japanese were going to lose, right? So the Americans eventually were able to fight them back, fight these Japanese off. The Americans were eventually able to fight the Japanese off, and we were able to take this island. We were able to destroy the last of these Japanese defenders. So when they pushed past, the Americans started recollecting, the lines and going forward. A first sergeant of the unit and 2 staff sergeants found Baker's body, and he was still propped up against that tree. And when they found him, that pistol that he had with the 8 rounds was laying by his side now. But now it was empty. And around Baker were the bodies of 8 dead Japanese soldiers.
Damn.
So he
killed.
Baker went out fighting, and he made every round count. I don't know if he played dead or what and waited for him to get close enough, but Baker with a hole in his chest, grenade shrapnel, probably multiple other minor wounds, traumatic brain injury, waiting to die. When the Japanese got close, he made his 8 rounds count, and he killed 8 Japanese soldiers to prevent them from getting forward and killing any more of his men. And that's the part that you might see on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah.
They'll show a picture of him, say he was given a pistol with 8, but they leave out the rest of the story.
Yeah.
So Baker was obviously killed in action, and for his actions, he was posthumously promoted to sergeant, and on May 19th, 1945, he was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions throughout the Battle of Saipan.
Yeah.
So not just for one individual, they collected him. And the medal was presented to his widow, Constance Cecilia Baker. Thomas is buried in the Gerald H.B. Solomon Saratoga National Cemetery in New York, and that's the story of Thomas Baker.
Damn.
So, again, one of those... We have different kinds of recipients. Some are unlikely recipients. Some rise to the occasion. Baker was one of those that was just a soldier throughout. You know, he fought as an individual in a sense, and he fought against insurmountable odds, but he stayed calm. Every one of his actions, he was described as being stoic or being calm. Right, with the bazooka, he calmly moved forward. He just pressed the threat, as they call it. He took the initiative. Right, the Japanese. They either have to face him or they have to face the main lines. And once it becomes him, he's already got the drop on him. He's already firing those bazooka rounds. And now you're not it's not 12 against 1, it's 6 against 1, and those ones are badly shaken. And then he's pushing forward with the bayonet. Again, the 12 against 1, when he finds him, the same thing. their first reaction to him is multiple soldiers are being shot, right? They're getting shot and they're getting hurt badly. Now, if you're the Japanese soldier, do you move to the gun and try to move it on him? Do you try to grab your own weapon? And then all of a sudden he's on top of you. He's throwing grenades. And he kept that calm. He kept that courage, right? And he kept it throughout. And he died with courage and he died with honor, like the Japanese were trying to do. Baker did that times 1,000. So.
Damn.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, U.S. Army Pacific, 27th Infantry Division. Again, another National Guard guy. We've talked about that on here before.
Yeah.
The differences in the National Guard and the regular Army. National Guard and Reserves have fought just as bravely for longer than the regular Army because they have.
Jocko did an episode about his time in Ramadi.
Yeah,
and he talked about a National Guard unit and he can't even talk about it without getting emotional.
Yeah.
He said the guys were just amazing and just as older.
A soldier's a soldier when the combat time comes, right? And again, you have a guy like Baker, whereas some of these poor guys joined after Pearl Harbor and had very little training, and then were thrust into combat. The National Guard, they had been fighting or training together as a unit for years, and then they're sent over. So they're going to be a more solid unit when they finally get into combat there. And you have older guys, and you have guys with more life experience in certain places.
That's a good one.
So
Good
that's
stuff.
the story of Thomas Baker. It's been a while. We'll try to get some more episodes up. Life happens.
Check out the movie.
We still got to go see the movie.
Yeah.
We're going to go see Devotion. We'll do our thoughts on that. Do a little mini episode here, possibly.
Devotion is what?
The story Thomas Hudner and Jesse Brown.
That's the episode we did previously.
Yeah,
now they
Korean War Medal of Honor.
They did a big theatrical release on the story, so we'll see how it is.
I heard it's good.
Yeah.
We'll see.
You did?
We'll see. I heard it's good, yeah.
Yeah.
But I talk to weird people, so that might not be a good representation of the
All right.
viewing audience. But thanks again for listening.
Thank
if you guys have any suggestions, comments, concerns, let us know. Please like, subscribe, and comment. And then maybe in like 6 months, we'll make another one.
Yeah, maybe.
Thanks.
All right.